Big time fight in our co-main event of UFC 261. We have the second title defense of China's Zhang Weili. And listen, it has been an absolute buzzsaw of a run in the UFC. You look at her overall body of work. You lose that early on in your career and go on an absolute heater. It's insane what Zhang Weili has done. And also featured on this card, we have three debuting fighters from China in Liang, who fights, in the same weight class at 115. We also have Aoriqileng, and we have Rongzhu as well. But for Zhang Weili in taking on Rose Namajunas, you look at the 5 fights coming into this. Michelle Waterson to ultimately end up in a title fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk 3 years and 4 months ago, UFC 217. Wow. It has been forever. Then she picks up another win over Joanna. She ends up losing to Jessica Andrade. Weird circumstances. Beats her in the rematch by split decision. Odd fight, especially closer to the end than it was to the start. But really, we get a fight like this and you go, well, for Zhang Weili, she comes into this one, she's almost 32. She's been off for a full year since the absolute war that was the fight of the year against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. 21-1 her overall record. For Rose Namajunas, she's been around since the season of The Ultimate Fighter that really brought in the strawweights. She's 28, so she's still young, and she only has 13 pro fights in her career. It's just weird, the two circumstances that both these women have had, the level of competition they face, and where they're at in their careers facing each other here in a fresh matchup up at the top.
It feels like Rose Namajunas has been involved with more title fights than Randy Couture, because it does feel like every single time she is in a fight, it feels like a belt's on the line, and that just really tells you what kind of a fighter you're dealing with when you do talk about Rose Namajunas. She is very well-rounded, but the fact that she was able to knock out the striker in Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and then defend the people who said it was a fluke win, go on and defend her title in, again, what probably was the greatest MMA fight in the division of all time until Weili and Joanna ended up taking that. But it just has been a really weird career for Rose Namajunas, because go back through some of her losses. We've seen her get out-wrestled by Carla Esparza. We saw her get out-struck at range by Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And we've seen her get, basically just slammed on her head by Jessica Andrade. Now, the one thing about Rose Namajunas is that if you beat her by one way, it's not going to happen again that same way. Very cerebral fighter and a very smart fighter who makes adjustments inside the cage. We saw that against Michelle Waterson even. Now, that fight, I feel terrible for Michelle Waterson. She basically got head kicked and rear naked choked in that fight, but you saw what Rose Namajunas was really capable of, and I at least feel like that was the first fight I looked at Rose Namajunas and thought, wow, she could at least fight for the title one day. I didn't think the UFC was going to immediately give her the title shot, which they ultimately did, and she made good on it, but that was the fight where I was like, okay, she's finally incorporated her jiu-jitsu along with her striking, and then you see what she was able to do against Joanna in those 2 fights. Rose Namajunas is a problem to deal with, and it will be really interesting to see what new wrinkles she brings to Weili, because with Weili, you know how good of a striker she is on the outside, and the neat thing about Weili too is we know how good her ground game is. Everyone talks about how great her striking is, how explosive, how accurate her strikes are, but her on either top position or off her back is an absolute handful to deal with, and that's why I'm so excited for this fight. I don't care where it takes place. They could be up against the cage, in open space, or on the mat. It's going to be exciting no matter where this fight takes place.
And we've seen a lot of different wrinkles in Zhang Weili's game. You bring that up. She averages over a takedown per 15 minutes. Her takedown accuracy might not be the best, but again, if you're going to strike to clinch, if you're going to work and tire your opponent, she's 100% takedown defense so far. And for Namajunas, you give one to take one, 53% accuracy, 50% of them are defended. The higher work rate going the way of the champ. Good accuracy on both of their respective sides. Again, you get different looks out of Zhang Weili, whether it's from southpaw or from orthodox. Probably going to get a little bit more orthodox out of Rose Namajunas, somebody who's fought at elevation in Colorado for a very long time. Listen, when we look at a fight like this with Rose Namajunas, it is weird because, again, we talk about Zhang Weili. She's been out for a year. Rose has fought more recently. It was a split decision fight over Jessica Andrade, where Rose looked really good early, and Jessica looked a little better later on. So it's an odd one. Again, it's kind of difficult at the top half of this division. Who do you give a title shot to? Do you go with, again, let's say this fight wasn't ever booked. So do you go with the hot hand of Mackenzie Dern? There's very few fighters that you can really go with that have been active recently. Suarez has been out forever. She needs to get a win. Nina Ansaroff just lost. Nina Nunes, rather. And then you look at this, it's a fresh matchup that we haven't seen before. So you give Zhang Weili to Rose Namajunas and vice versa. For Zhang Weili, she made her debut just over 2.5 years ago, beat Danielle Taylor. You want to see that win. Submits Jag. just a pioneer of the sport. She beats Tisha Torres, she beats Jessica Andrade and finishes her to win the belt, and then she fights Joanna Jędrzejczyk in an all-timer. And listen, you can make an argument both ways. I know I had scored it for Zhang Weili. Going back and watching it, I've still scored it for Zhang Weili. But again, you can make the case. Strength of schedule probably sides with Namajunas. It definitely sides with Namajunas. If you really go through it, she's fought the highest level competition basically since she's turned pro, really. And it's been a long career, albeit again, she's young and she has less fights. So it is a tricky one because, like you said, for Namajunas, always brings a different kind of aspect into every fight. What do you almost expect as a game plan against somebody like Zhang Weili, having that Trevor Whitman connection coming into this?
So for Namajunas, that really is the question, because I kind of know what I'm going to get out of Weili in this fight. I'm going to get the forward pressure. I'm going to get her throwing in combinations, and I think she is quite a bit faster than Namajunas. That's one thing that you should really watch out for, because whoever's landing first is going to be the one landing more often throughout this fight. I don't think either one has cardio issues, although, like you had mentioned, in the Andrade fight, at least in the third round, she did start to fade. Now, she did have a pretty good output in those first 2 rounds, and I think if she did kind of at least manage her energy a little bit better, she would have been able to fight a little bit stronger in the third round. But for Rose, I don't really know what she's going to do on the outside consistently. She has a great leg kick. She has good hooks of her own, and I do think Namajunas has some good power in her shots. Of course, we saw that in the Joanna fight. But for Namajunas, she's going to have to be the one to make Weili stop just throwing punches. And that could be hit her with a big shot, earn her respect. That could be go for takedown attempts. But for Rose, I really do think she's going to have to incorporate her ground game sooner rather than later in this fight. Because if she can get her hands around Weili and just make her work, I think that's going to be her game plan. Zhang is really good off her back and getting back up to her feet. So, again, it's not an easy game plan by any means, but I do think Rose has to make this an ugly fight. If she can work it on the inside, now, even that's going to be tough to do because we've seen Namajunas have good success being that outside fighter. I just doubt she's going to be able to get enough leg kicks tallied up to really make a big difference against Weili. And one thing Weili can do, we saw Joanna Jędrzejczyk in the second fight with Rose Namajunas. She threw a lot of leg kicks that Namajunas was not able to check herself. Now, Namajunas has good offensive leg kicks, but defensively, she doesn't check any, so Zhang can really start hammering home those leg kicks early and often. I think they will pay off as this fight progresses. I just think Rose is going to have a tough time with not only the power, but the volume of Weili. And if Rose can't get the confidence or at least get the respect of Weili at some point in this fight on the feet, I do just see Zhang walking away with a decision. I do think just her forward movement is going to keep Namajunas in a certain defensive shell that won't let her throw back.
Yeah, to me, it is a tricky one. Again, for Rose Namajunas, you can never counter out. I mean, she has 2 wins over Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Zhang Weili only has the 1. It was by split. It was close.
And I thought Joanna won.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can agree to disagree on all of this stuff.
Though.
It was close, though. So you look at a fight like this where Rose, she opened a plus 170. She's at about a plus 163 on best fight odds. Zhang Weili opened a minus 200. Still about there as we speak. The votes on Tapology, 1,090 of them. 75% was Zhang. 49% by decision to 45% by knockout. For the supporters of Namajunas, 25% of all the votes. 65% by decision. I like Zhang Weili. I like Zhang Weili as the fight goes on. I like her on the outside. I like the output. I like the leg kicks. And if it gets into a grappling match, that's where it gets really interesting. If it does happen, I slightly favor Zhang Weili in this fight. And when you really saw her make her rise and then ultimately get the win over Joanna, it was like, holy smokes. I mean, I don't know who can beat her. Like, it really is difficult. Because if you finish Jessica Andrade, which is very, very difficult to do, and you have the fights that you've had, it's tough to see somebody beating her. Maybe it's a Suarez. I don't really see it for Namajunas, but I can't wait to see what the fans are thinking about this one.
So, I think Namajunas is going to get this fight to the mat at some point, and I think, and now, I'm going to pick Zhang Weili. I will be very open about that. Rose Namajunas is going to make everybody nervous, though. I do see her having some success on the ground, where it's one of those things where she might get a submission, but it's close to the end of the round, and it's like, ugh, we got lucky on that one. So I am going to pick Zhang Weili, but I do think this will be a very interesting fight, and a fight that's going to be entertaining, like I said, no matter where it takes place. Like, if this is 25 minutes of grappling between these two, it should be very entertaining. If it's 25 minutes of striking, it should be the same.
Matt, both of us going with Zhang Weili to get the win, and still, and Matt, we have a big-time main event on the way. UFC 261, the rematch of UFC 251, between Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal. This is a full camp Masvidal. This isn't the Versace wearing, pizza eating, private jet riding Masvidal who's coming in on a week's notice. You got full camp Masvidal. Will we get what we got in his fight against Darren Till? Who knows, but I'm really looking forward to that fight. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.